on Patreon and help us support communities in need.
The day after all that snow. Got a nice slurry on the water today. Yeah, nice, icy slurry. It's cold. It's cold stuff right there. Pretty though.
As soon as the dog stops attacking me.
On this episode, when dogs attack.
She always wants to be the star, and you want me star. Okay. So today, we thought we might do a little video on the heating in our boat. I know personally I get tons of questions for some reason on this. People wanting to know, are you warm on the boat in the winter? How are you keeping your boat warm? Are you freezing to death? So I thought it might be fun to do a little video on, how we heat the boat and how we can actually wear t-shirts in the winter on our boat because it's so cozy warm. So let's check it out. So this is our lovely diesel fueled heater. And as you can see, it has a nice flame. It's pretty to look at. But more than that, it heats this boat insanely well. So Josh can probably tell you a bit more about the mechanics of it since he got it working. But...
Yeah. Well, we were lucky that that the boat was it had the heater roughed in, like it had it so like the plumbing was in place in terms of the chimney flue and the air intake. So just to break it down here for a lot of people who may not understand how these little units work, they're very, very simple. It's just a simple, you can see there on the right of the unit, there's just a simple little, basically what you could describe as a little carburetor. So the fuel goes in it, it's pumped up from a fuel pump and into the little carburetor, and then it pumps into, basically just floods the bottom of this heater, and you light it like you would any stove with a paper towel and fire, and you drop it down there and it burns, and as it heats up you turn the gas on, and it's just basically a flame, and it's kind of like a carburetor, or kind of like a combustion engine in that sense. It atomizes the fuel as it heats up. The fuel on the bottom basically just creates a vapor, and the vapor, when it hits the top of the burning ring there, burns as flame towards the top of the, or about the middle of the unit. And then that heat rises through this top portion and through the pipe itself. And that's what's generating the heat, is the top portion of this stove and the pipe, and then it gets fresh air right through the top and basically comes in and through into the bottom of the stove. So it's not actually, there's an air exchange with the unit itself, so it's not actually taking air out of the cabin, because then you'd have, you'd be starving your breathing environment of oxygen. So that's how it works. Let's
prove to people that it actually is warm in here.
Oh, absolutely.
We have a thermometer.
Yeah, so right now it's 2 degrees. We just checked the temperature outside. It's 2 degrees and raining at the moment. And here's the temperature. If you can see that, hopefully it'll focus there. It's a little tricky to see, but you can see in here it's about 22.3 degrees, and you could see on the temperature there, that's our fridge, is about 3 degrees in the fridge. So that's not really important to you, but so Morgan gets a lot of questions about this. I get a lot of questions about it online, and lately being winter time and other boat channels that people enjoy watching will feature people who or in some cases struggling with keeping their boat warm. And so we thought it'd be interesting to just go over sort of our strategy, because we really have very little issues with mold at all. You know, once in a while, if there's a spot where we have something like up in the V-berth, you can see past Morgan, we got stuff piled up in there. Say we leave a backpack or something right against the hull. Literally, like, you can leave something there, and after a month, you're like, oh shoot, I forgot I left this bag up against the hull. There could be an insulation thing there where it's condensating, and then you'll get like a little bit of mildew on the wall type thing.
But not bad.
But not bad. I mean, like we've seen recent videos where some people are battling mold issues on like basically 2 to 3 days, and it's just a constant struggle, and I feel for folks like that. But something that's worth noting is that on our boat, it's a steel boat, so I'm going to show you what's going on behind the cabinets here themselves. You'll see in there the blue foam, right? You're not actually seeing the hull there. That it might be difficult to see, but that's actually a blue foam. I can't remember exactly. I think it's like some kind of poly foam, and they're hard panels, and they're about, I don't know, maybe 1.5 inches thick or so. And that is what lines the entirety of the hull. Being a steel boat, you know, steel's not exactly, it doesn't have any of its own natural heating properties. So to keep steel boats insulated and helps soundproof them a little bit, the whole boat, basically right down to the waterline, is lined with those foam panels, which is an advantage that a lot of fiberglass boats don't have right off the get-go. And that's for 2 reasons. The hull's lined with that kind of insulation because it protects the hull itself from condensation building up on the steel and building up on the steel stringers, where the water will sit on the stringers and cause corrosion issues. So by insulating the hull, it's actually not even as much about comfort as it is about protecting the boat itself, so that the hull isn't getting a bunch of condensation from warm air hitting the cold hull and causing water. Now, that said, our builds will run about 1 to 2 times a day tops, which is literally from condensation just running down from the waterline down. And I'll see, you got that light again, eh?
Yeah.
Let's have a look. I'll show you what I'm talking about. If we can get the camera to kind of pick this up, you'll see on the hull here where the foam stops, and you can see the glue from where the foam, there you can see there's a foam panel there, and then right in front of us is just steel where a piece of foam was taken off for maintenance purposes. But you may or may not be able to pick up that there. It's actually not too bad because it's a little warmer. When it's in the minuses, you'll really see this sweating going on, but even though the camera, now you can kind of see it there. Even though the camera doesn't quite pick it up, there's just this little beads of water. And from the water line down, basically, you get that happening. So from the foam up, it's not really happening, but where the cold hull in the water and it meets the warm air coming from the cabin, we get this sweating going on, and that runs, you can see where it will sit on the stringer, and there's certain spots along the stringer where water's allowed to come through and eventually work its way into the bilge, where the bilge pump is. Okay, so that is what's going on. The reason they don't insulate them from the waterline down is for that exact reason, because from the waterline down you're going to have condensation no matter what, and if you had foam there, you're just going to be trapping water behind the foam, and then you can't even service any of the corrosion issues. But theoretically and practically, for the most part, from the waterline up, there's very, very little corrosion going on if it's properly insulated, and then foam insulation around the panels, or foam insulation on the hull inside of the hull to prevent air from getting to the steel to oxidize and corrode. Right?
Right.
Holy, did I ever just ramble on there or what?
And it wasn't even on you. It should have been you, because he was gesturing a lot, so it would have been helpful.
Yeah. Well, no one wants to see me, but so that's a quick description. Now, as part of that, the reality of dealing with, it's like I said, 2 degrees, so it's not exactly warm out here right now, but airflow is really critical to keeping the mildew issues at bay, having some air exchange. So as part of our strategy, we combined, while we're on the dock, right, we've got the heater going, which basically keeps the cabin at least 20 degrees pretty much at all times. And we also, sorry about the lighting issues, but we also use little space heater as well. So the space heater, in combination with the diesel heater, allows us to just kind of do like what, spot treatment, right? So back here, since there's not a lot of air circulation, this is helping to provide air circulation and heat. So right where the bed is normally pushed up, we pull the bed every morning. We pull the bed back from the hull there, from the back of the boat, and allow this heat and air to circulate around the back of the bed so that the bed can't get cold and damp back there. So every morning we do that. We pull the bed out, and then we'll actually prop the mattress up and stick the heater so it's pointing at the underside of the mattress. Every day we do that. So I mean, it's not really that big of a deal, but we do that. We'll open up a window, like we'll come in here and open up a porthole. Right now it's closed. And we also keep the window up in the salon open much of the time as well. So this is just allowing the heat in the cabin. So yeah, you'll see it's 2 degrees out, but we have the window open like this, and that's a big window. It's gonna, for perspective, it's not hard to tell, but I mean, we have a huge area, surface area of windows up in the salon here, but we keep that open pretty much all day long and much of the evening until quite late. If it's starting to cool down at night, we'll close it and allow the heat to build up. But I mean, you saw it's 22 degrees. That's down in the galley. Up here, it's even warmer because the heat's rising up here. It's a good 3-foot rise from the galley up into the salon.
Much warmer up here.
So that helps to basically push the moisture out. So we've really, it's not necessarily cheap burning all that diesel, but the quality of life component, to keeping the temperature of this warm and comfortable, in combination with trying to do away with all the issues of having to chase molds around and stuff like that. I'd rather burn a few $100 of diesel over the course of a winter, like you would anyway. If you had a wood stove, you're going to spend $400 or $500, a couple cords of wood kind of thing. If you're on hydro, you're going to spend a couple grand over the winter on heat at least. Like, I mean, when we had our house, what were we spending? We were spending like
$400 every 2 months to $700 every 2 months in the winter.
Yeah, on even higher. We were getting bills like just under $1,000 per 2 weeks. So right, so in a month we were spending close to $2,000 on hydro, right, to heat our house before we got a wood stove. And then with the wood stove, we probably spent about $600 to $800 over the winter on wood.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, if we spend $300 on diesel, I doubt it will even be that much. To keep it warm in here, to abate any of the mold issues, that's money well spent to me. And the hydro is paid for as part of our mortgage. So
it's a dry heat, right? That's why it works. It's a dry heat.
Yeah, that's a good point, Morgan, wife.
Thank you.
It's a good heat. Go ahead if you want to explain that, what we mean by dry heat.
Well, what we found when we had the wood stove at our house was that the ambient heat given off by the wood versus just an electrical push heat tends to actually dry the air out instead of just circulating warm air.
Yeah.
So it actually is taking moisture and moving it away rather than having it become mold on the walls. So it feels warmer because it's a dry heat.
Yeah.
Is as best as I can describe it.
So this gets confused a lot. I've seen on a number of like sailing posts and whatnot, people and RV people who are doing the living in a van and small homes in general, where people talk about, well, electric is the driest heat. Theoretically, yes, because electric is just heating a coil and then blowing heat. There's no moisture, there's no water vapor in electric heat. So technically it is the driest heat, but practically, no, it's not. Electric heat doesn't remove moisture from your environment per se, like a gas heat will. Now, propane is a bad example of that because propane has a lot of moisture in it as a byproduct when it's being burned for heat. So propane adds a lot of moisture and heat. Electric would be good if you could just completely overwhelm your space, but it doesn't.
It would be completely inefficient. How much energy that would take would
a ton of energy.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of like an environmental function, a lot of electricity. You know, yeah, you'd need a lot. Like space heaters aren't great. Anyone who has space heaters in their house know that the heat basically runs up the wall and out the windows.
Yeah.
You know, so the diesel heater has, I don't think it's like 18,000 BTU or something for our space, which is, I don't even know if it's like 400 square feet in this entire boat, right? Like, I mean, it's smaller than a small apartment in terms of square footage.
Yeah.
But say, you know, 15 or 18,000 BTU in that little burner. The amount of heat that's producing overwhelms this space with heat, and then by opening the window, the moisture and the heat can exchange, right? So we're pushing out any moisture that's like just latently sitting on the walls and on the windows. So I mean, you can look at the windows right now. We have a tarp too. I'll explain, you know, the benefit of this tarp.
These are dry.
If you look at the windows, like there's a little bit of sweating right there on the windowsill. You can see the glint there a little bit. Like, I mean, it's minimal. You can see where like the wood along the wall itself, the side of the cabin there is a little bit damp, right? But I mean, for the most part, yeah, you can see that now, right? You can see the wood gets a little bit damp from condensation there. But for the most part, there's no molding there, and we'll spritz it with a vinegar, like a concentrated white vinegar, spritz it and wipe it down, you know, once every week or so, just to make sure that any spores that could grow there are killed. And they do, if you leave it alone for too long, you will, just because you do get the condensation there. But what we quickly discovered too is that by stringing this tarp up, which you can maybe see a little bit of out the cabin here, by stringing this tarp up as well, it keeps the water off the windows itself. Now, again, you can see, like, if you're in a fiberglass boat that isn't insulated, you'll immediately know what I'm talking about. You know, your windows are probably damp and condensated. You can see it a little bit here at the front edge of this window. Where the tarp ends. Where the tarp ends and there's water actually touching the window, it exacerbates that condensation issue. So, a quick tip for anyone who's dealing with trying to keep their boat dry, or if you can stretch a tarp over top of any of your portholes and larger cabin windows, that will help by just keeping the water off the exterior of your boat and actually off the cabin top. Now, when we had snow sitting right on top of the cabin before we had the tarp up, it snowed, and the cold air on the boat cabin top, and with this heat in here, you could see wherever the steel stringers run across the superstructure of the boat, you get the beads of condensation on it.
So there's many ways moisture can get into the boat, which is why it's important to drive it out, and a wet dog is certainly one of them. So being out in the rain, this towel is now soaked, and it's going to go up in front of the diesel heater to dry out. So this is a major way water gets into the boat. Ew.
You make it get wet in here, you.
Not to mention all of the rain gear that gets wet from the person who walked the dog, and that now has to get hung up somewhere as well.
Definitely.
So these are a lot of wet things coming into the boat.
Another major source of moisture is cooking. Sorry that the light isn't picking up very well, but cooking, like we were saying, the propane is a wet type of heat anyway, because there's a lot of moisture content within the gas itself. So when we're cooking, right above the stove here, we conveniently have our porthole that we can open up, and right here we have a fan, a little Hella fan.
The Hella fan.
And
it's hella good.
Turn that little guy on, and it blows the steam from emanating thusly from the stove out the window.
I like your visualization there.
Yes. I watched The Price, or no, what was it? The one with Vanna White on it. Wheel of Fortune. She taught me a great deal about hand acting. One of the greatest hand actors of all time. She's very handy.
But yeah, when I'm cooking, it's so steamy, and you'll see the windows up here just get covered in steam. So
look at that hand acting right there.
Right? Like, this is natural. Like, I'm gifted.
Yeah, you're special anyway.
Shut up.
Shut up. And then I also, like we talked about it a second ago, but I also wanted to, it's getting dark now, so don't mind us, but I also wanted to mention like how we actually intentionally keep stuff away from, yeah, you can kind of see in there a little bit now. We keep stuff away from the sides, right? So if you're somebody living aboard a boat or an RV or anything like that, yeah, bring that light here for a second. It's tricky because you're dealing with like a limited space to begin with, and our natural inclination is to like pour or shove our shit into like whatever little nooks and crannies we can. But so our V berth, it's not a tiny space by any means, but it's not a huge space, but it's largely storage right now. So I've got, you know, sail covers and deck cushions and some rigging stuff and whatnot. But I've pulled everything away from the sides because as long as it's not touching the sides, it won't create that that condensation and insulation thing going on. So we've pulled the cushions away from, like I've taken the cushions that are normally stretched and touched right against the hull and stacked them on top of each other, and then pulled everything away from the side and stacked that all on top of the cushions. My guitar, I got guitars there. And that's same like I was saying with the mattress. We pull the mattress away right from the side of the hull, and basically like these spaces in here are well insulated anyway, so we don't really have an issue with stuff. But you could get into trouble if you're especially like fiberglass boats. I'm not picking on fiberglass boats. It's just a reality if they're not insulated purposefully. Fiberglass itself has some insulating properties, but right. So this is like behind here is all, you know, again the polystyrene stuff, and it's well insulated. But if you had just like your bread or cornflakes right up against the hull, you'd want to open spaces up like this to make sure that there's air circulating, right? So our hanging closets, like we have some issues with this closet if we don't stay on top of it.
All the closets, actually.
Yeah, really, all the closets do. There's too much stuff there open there, but so every now and again we got to open them up and kind of spritz them down, and but typically, as long as you're doing a good job of keeping everything away from touching the sides of stuff, like even our cushions in the salon here are you know, they're not anywhere near the hull. There's like lots of insulation between the hull or the cabin side and the cushions themselves, or else you'd have problems normally, like something like this, a cushion sitting here touching right up against, you'd pull it back and you'd see it all be mold back there. But because this is insulated, and you don't have that problem. So just wanted to mention that if you're doing a good job of keeping everything pulled away from the sides of the hull and keeping it super warm and keeping air circulation going, you won't run into any problems. Like right here, see, nice and dry, nice. Well insulated, no mold over there. So
most of this boat is surprisingly really good for not being bad for condensation.